Welcome to Stories for Wonderful Children. I'm Dan Wendelin, your host and storyteller. For years, I improvised a new bedtime story for my children every night. Now, we would like to share the recordings of the best of those stories with you. I hope you enjoy my Stories for Wonderful Children. Very special house, full of many special rooms, and in it there lives a little girl named Winella.
There's a very special in a very special house.
Yep.
In a very special room was a very special girl named Winella.
And Winella had two siblings. She had a brother named Wally.
Yes.
And she had a little sister named Tritana.
Yes.
And Tritana had been growing and getting bigger and bigger, the same as Wally. And one day, Winella's mommy had to go downstairs and change some laundry from one walrus.
What? They're looking for a story.
From one walrus to another walrus.
One walrus to another walrus. What in the world does that mean?
Yes, the way they do laundry, they don't have a washing machine. They have a big tub that they put clothes in, and then they have two walruses. And there are two tubs, actually. One tub is full of soapy water, and the other tub is full of clean water. And so what you do is you put your clothes in, and the walrus sticks its big long tusks down in the soapy water, and it stirs them around and around and around until the clothes are all soapy. And then you have to change the clothes out of that tub into the clean water tub, where the other walrus stirs them around and around in the clean water until all the soap is off of them. So that's what Winella's mommy was doing. She was going downstairs to change the clothes from one walrus to the next. And she asked Winella if she would keep an eye on Tritana. And Winella said sure. She figured that would be really easy because Tritana didn't usually move around all that much. And so Winella figured she could mostly read her book while keeping one eye on Tritana, who was playing with a big rubber ball that made music when you rolled it. So you would roll it and it would sing, or you would roll it and it would play drums, or something like that. Tritana really liked that ball. It was one of her favorite toys. So Winella sat down with her book, keeping one eye on Tritana. She heard the ball singing, and so she figured Tritana was still busy, but she looked up from her book, and she saw the ball rolling across the room, but there was no Tritana in the room. So Winella jumped up and ran into the next room yelling, Tritana! And she heard a sound, which was the sort of sound Tritana made when she was particularly interested in something. And so Winella followed that sound into the front room of the house. And there was Tritana, and she was getting ready to pull a heavy book off of a low shelf. And Winella said, "Oh, Tritana!" And she jumped, and she just barely kept the book from falling and smacking Tritana. She said, "I don't think that's a book for you anyway, Tritana. Let's get one of your books." And she picked her up, started walking back into the back room saying, "You know, you're getting really fast." And Tritana looked at her and grabbed her nose and said, So Winella took her to the bookshelf in the room she was in, and Tritana started looking through her books. And she seemed pretty happy with that. So Winella looked down at her own book, and she felt something grab her leg, and she's down, and Tritana had a book in one hand, and she crawled over and she grabbed Winella's leg with the other hand. And she looked at Winella and said, "Gaboo." And so Winella said, "Do you want me to read you the book?" And Tritana gave her a big grin. And so Winella pulled her up on her lap, and she read her a book. After she'd read her that one, Tritana clapped and said, "Ah." And Winella said, "Do you want another book?" And Tritana said, "Ah." And Winella figured that probably meant more, another book. So Winella reached down to the bookshelf and she got out a Dr. Seuss book called Marvin K. Mooney. Will you please...
I can read that book.
Yes, you can. Marvin K. Mooney, will you please go now? And she read that book to Tritana, and Tritana really liked it. She liked after Winella would say, Marvin K. Mooney, will you please go now? Tritana would go, ah. I think she was trying to, that's right, I think she was trying to say now. So, about that time, Winella's mommy came back upstairs. She said, thank you for watching Tritana for me. And Winella said, you know, Mommy, I was thinking, Tritana's never seen the treehouse. Can I take her out to the treehouse? And her mommy said, well, you have to be really careful, okay? Don't drop her. She could really get hurt if she fell from that treehouse. And Winella said, I'll be really careful, Mommy. So, she went out into the backyard, and she climbed up the ladder, holding Tritana in one arm, and climbing with her other arm, which was sort of a little tricky. But she climbed up to the top of the ladder.
Was Tritana playing with a flower?
No, actually, Tritana was just looking around. She was really interested because she'd never seen Winella's clubhouse before.
How big was it?
Winella's clubhouse was not really big. It's probably maybe a little smaller than about half the size of this room, I'd say. A little smaller than that. So anyway, Winella set Tritana down, and Tritana said, and she started to crawl around exploring the treehouse. Tritana seemed to find it really interesting. She found a hole in one of the boards of the floor, sort of a little knot hole, and she put her eye up to it and seemed to find that really interesting that she could look down and see the ground. She would look through the hole, and then she would go, ee, and sit up and clap, and then she would look down through the hole again. Well, Winella went over to get out some cups that she usually used when she and her friends had hot chocolate in the treehouse. She wanted to show Tritana the cups, and she heard Tritana go, ooh, which was a new noise. So Winella walked over, and Tritana was looking through the hole, and so Winella went over and she looked down through the hole, and she saw down at the bottom of the tree a goblin lurking at the bottom of the tree. Now, goblins don't normally worry Winella very much, because she's had to deal with a lot of them, and she's pretty experienced in dealing with them, and they don't really scare her. But she was a little worried because she was with Tritana, and she was a little worried that she wouldn't be able to deal with the goblin while also protecting Tritana. And so she decided that it was time to call in some reinforcements. So instead of climbing down the ladder, she stood out on the railing of the treehouse and she yelled, Joey! And she saw Joey look up from the top of the roof, and he flapped down and he landed in the treehouse. And she said, Joey, I don't want to go down the ladder because there's a goblin down there. She said, I just want to get back to the house. And he said, you want me to just tell your mom? And she goes, no, if you just take us back to the house, then I'd be fine. She said, can you carry both me and Tritana? And Joey said, sure, that shouldn't be a problem. Winella put Tritana on Joey's back, and then she climbed on right behind her, and she held on with one hand and held on to Tritana with the other, and she said, okay. And Joey jumped off the railing of the treehouse, and Tritana went, ee! And Joey's big wings flap, flap, flapped, and he took them up, up, up to the top of the house. And Winella looked back, and she could see that it was a particularly clueless goblin that was lurking around the bottom of the tree, because he hadn't even noticed them leaving. He was just busy watching the ladder, and since they hadn't come out on the ladder, he didn't even realize they'd left. So Winella went back in the house. She gave Tritana back to her mommy and said, thanks, Mom. Tritana liked the treehouse. I've got something I need to take care of out in the backyard. So she went up to her room, and at first she thought about getting her magic wand out, but then she thought that would be overkill for just one goblin. So instead she went to her desk and she got out her pack of chewing gum, and she popped 2 pieces in her mouth and started to chew them. as she slid down the slide to the first floor, and then she went out the front door, still chewing her gum. And she walked around to Tracy's house and walked through Tracy's backyard, so that she came up from the other side of the tree than the goblin was on. And then she walked very quietly through her own yard, and then she peeked around the tree. The goblin had his back to her, and so she spat out the pieces of gum really quietly in her hand. And then she took one piece of gum and she put it just behind both the goblin's feet. And then she waited. And sure enough, after a minute, he took a little step backward, just adjusting his weight, and he stepped right on her gum with both feet. And then she sat down and she waited. She waited about 5 minutes. And then she looked around the tree. She saw the goblin was not one of the special goblins that Jack Frost, or Nightmare, or whichever Frost Fairy he worked for, allowed to carry a wand. He was just a normal goblin, no wand. And so Winella said, "Excuse me." And the goblin went, "What? Hey!" And he started to try to walk towards her, but he looked down, his feet were stuck firmly to the ground with those big wads of gum. Winella said, "Hey, yourself. What are you doing in my yard?" And the goblin said, "None of your business." And Winella said, "Oh, really? You think so, huh? If you're in my yard, it's my business, Buster." And she looked right at him, and he could see that she was not afraid of him at all. And he said, "Well, maybe I'd just better be leaving then." "Well, you would be," said Winella, "except you appear to be stuck here. So I think I'd better arrange some transport out of here for you." She went into the garage, and she got their trampoline, and she put it right in front of him, and then she pushed him really hard, and he fell right on the trampoline, and he bounced so hard that it broke him off the gum, and he bounced up into the air, and she shoved the trampoline under him, and he bounced again, and she shoved the trampoline again, and she bounced him that way, sort of juggling him all the way over to the wall in the backyard that was the Cat's Paw Highway, and then she bounced him over it, and she said, "There, that side is not my yard, but I don't want to see you around here again, you got it?" And the goblin said, "You don't worry, you won't see me." And then he slinked off. And Winella put the trampoline back into the garage, and she went inside, which was good because it was lunchtime, and her mommy had said that she could help feed Tritana lunch, which was getting more interesting because Tritana could eat more kinds of things now, and she seemed really interested in food. So Winella enjoyed introducing her to new and different foods. And that is the end of the story.
Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created today's show, but questions and running commentary were supplied by my children. The theme music was created by Brandon Thompson, and our wonderful logo was designed by Silas Swindlin. If you know someone who might enjoy the show, please tell them about it. Do you want more stories? You can now subscribe to the show and help pick a new story for me to tell every month. The show's website is storiesforwonderfulchildren.com. Until next time, I'm Dan Wendelin, reminding you to tell someone you love a story.